Welcome back. The FBI announced late this afternoon they are now investigating last week's mass shooting in Gilroy, California as domestic terrorism. Authorities revealed today they discovered a target list compiled by the suspect that mentioned religious institutions, federal buildings, and both major political parties, but they did not reveal any more information than that. That development, of course, comes as federal investigators are also treating the massacre in El Paso as an act of domestic terrorism. In his address yesterday, President Trump pledged federal resources to curb domestic terrorism. But NBC News reports the Department of Homeland Security has actually made cuts to personnel and resources devoted to fight domestic terrorism over the past 2 years. Perhaps that'll change, but right now, that's the facts. And dwindling resources aren't the only obstacle for law enforcement. Federal agencies do not have the same authority to pursue domestic terrorism suspects as they do in foreign investigations. There is no federal law on the books for domestic terrorism. So joining me now is someone with a lot of experience in the counterterrorism world, Nick Rasmussen. He's the former director of the National Counterterrorism Center. He's now the senior director for national security and counterterrorism programs at the McCain Institute. Oh, by the way, he's a national security analyst for us here at NBC News and MSNBC. Nick, good to see you.
Chuck, good to be here.
So, at the Counterterrorism Center, let's start with that job. Domestic terrorism, how much of your job was taken up by that at the CTC?
Absolutely none, actually.
Wow.
Because in the period after 9/11, when NCTC, the National Counterterrorism Center, was created, the legislation that created NCTC said it will do all of this stuff related to terrorism except for domestic terrorism, because that was seen to be in the FBI's purview, and that NCTC would focus, along with the other intelligence agencies, on the overseas terrorism problem.
So if you ever came across a cell that turned out to be domestic and not foreign, even if it was on American soil, like you were pursuing an international initiative of domestic, you just, CTC walks away? Or
NCTC would certainly look at individuals in the homeland or group or people, clusters of individuals in the homeland who were tied to ideologies from overseas. So ISIS-inspired individuals, Al-Qaeda-inspired individuals who were operating here in the homeland would certainly be viewed as international terrorists, even though they were in our neighborhoods, amongst us, living and working, right down the street from all of us.
What's the significance of the FBI saying that they're investigating something as domestic terrorism? There has to be some legal significance here, or is there not?
Well, I'm not sure there's a tremendous amount of legal significance.
Is this just saying it to make the public?
Because again, as you pointed out in your opening, there is not a domestic terrorism statute. Domestic terrorism is defined in law, but it is not actually statutorily prohibited in a way that allows the FBI or the Justice Department to charge an individual with domestic terrorism. It's more of a categorization. What it means is it puts it in a certain work stream for the FBI, and a certain group of people at the FBI, of agents and analysts, will work the problem because it is now domestic terrorism.
What makes someone a domestic terrorist? I guess at this point, does eco-terrorism, had that fallen into that category too?
It certainly could.
So it's anybody that wants to attack the government? Is that
my definition,
how the FBI has defined it?
The definition that I think most commonly obtains in this area is when a violent act is undertaken with the idea of pressuring the government, influencing the government, intimidating the population for a political end, that makes it terrorism. So that distinguish it, of course, from random acts of violence, or Dayton, for example. We do not yet have anything in Dayton that establishes that the perpetrator had a political motive. So that's why you're not hearing FBI.
And there's a line between political motive and political beliefs,
political beliefs.
Like there is a lot of people, I think, on the right trying to make the Dayton story part of the El Paso story right now, and doesn't appear to be the evidence.
We may know a little bit about the person's political inclinations, but there is no indication right now
that the act
was tied to a political agenda, whereas in El Paso, it was abundantly clear.
And that is the difference.
Yes.
The act is motivated in domestic terrorism. That's what gets it that tag.
Exactly.
Okay. Give me the limitations you have. So the FBI is trying to do domestic terrorism. We know there are a handful of groups, whether it's this 8chan world, whether it's a cyber world or an actual physical group. What power would you need from the federal government that you don't have to properly go after these folks?
Well, let me just give you a comparative example. If an individual in the United States latches on to Al-Qaeda or ISIS as part of their belief system, and then they take some steps to act on that. They try to go to Turkey in order to go into Syria and fight for ISIS.
It's been almost a standard FBI trap for these guys over the years.
Well,
as they've been found on.
The actions that these individuals take constitute material support for terrorism because they are taking steps to act in support of a designated terrorist group. ISIS, Al-Qaeda. There isn't an analogous situation on the domestic terrorism side.
There isn't a group you can designate.
Because we don't designate groups in that way. And that's not just because we haven't thought of it. It's because it's fraught with potential political peril.
There's that thing called the First Amendment?
There's that thing called the First Amendment. So as FBI Director Wray has said in testimony, they're not interested in policing political speech in the FBI. They're interested in working these problems when they start to approach the point where violence or when violence has actually been undertaken. So it does make it harder for the FBI to actually investigate groups proactively.
So, you know, it's interesting being a former head of the National Counterterrorism Center. I remember at first there was always this thought, there's never a ticking time bomb. There's never this moment like the issue of 24. You know, that was back when people were trying to make the case for torture at some point. So you got to find out. This was a weird incident in that we had 19 minutes. What could have been done, and is that, should the federal government say, if we have a 19-minute head start as we did, what laws do we need to support the ability in order to unearth this individual? Do we need to sort of backtrack that, or is our Constitution make that impossible?
I think it makes it pretty difficult, and I'm not willing to kind of point the finger at the
I understand that.
At the FBI and say in that 19 minutes something could have been done, should have been done, might have been done. It just simply
is there power over 8chan that the federal government needs to have in that 19-minute period? I don't know. I'm just asking. And is that
again? Other countries are grappling with this problem. True. I'm headed on Friday to Australia to spend some time down there doing some teaching, and the Australians have passed a law earlier this year that basically says that any social media company that doesn't take down material that seems to imply violence will be subject to federal penalty. Imagine doing that in our system.
I think the ACLU would have a client.
Exactly.
They would have a lot of clients.
Because again, this pendulum swings both ways, as you certainly know.
No, I mean, I think that's the thing. There are people that are on one hand would be like, yes, we want to give the federal government the power to do this, and on the other hand, oh wait, what if the federal government's of a political persuasion I don't like?
Or imagine an environmental group that some would see as espousing eco-terrorism.
Yeah.
Can you shut down their ability to engage in political debate because of somebody's view that they are eco-terrorists?
All of this a bigger challenge when the leader isn't on the same page as the rest of the government. Nick Rasmussen, good to see you. Thanks for coming and sharing your expertise.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.